I adjusted the final centerpiece with fresh hydrangeas and looked out at my backyard. 80 white folding chairs gleamed under the afternoon sun, waiting for the guests. I'm Martha, 68 years old, former owner of the catering company, The Golden Spoon. My son, Jason, doesn't understand that respect is something cooked slow and low, but he is about to taste a dish he never imagined. Everything was perfect, just as I had planned for months. The aroma of my signature hickory-smoked brisket, my specialty, was beginning to drift from the smokers in the outdoor kitchen, mixing with the sweet scent of the honeysuckle climbing the patio walls. I had spent 3 whole days prepping the dry rub, slow roasting the almonds for the green beans, and ensuring the meat was so tender it would fall apart just by looking at it. This wasn't just any effort. It was the graduation party for my granddaughter Sophie, my only grandchild, the light of my life who had just finished her degree in architecture. I had offered to organize the celebration myself, not to save them money, but because I wanted to give my girl something made with love, something with roots, something no modern event planning company could ever replicate. I smoothed out my embroidered apron, the one I only use for special occasions, and checked my watch. It was 5:50 p.m. The guests were told to arrive at 6:30. Everything was timed with the precision that characterized me during the 40 years I ran my catering business. Before I retired, there wasn't a wedding, baptism, or town festival in this county that didn't feature my cooking. People used to say that Martha's food had the power to fix broken marriages and calm the most difficult in-laws. Now, even though I no longer work for the public, my hands haven't forgotten the rhythm of the kitchen nor the art of serving. I heard the engine of an SUV brake abruptly in front of the iron gate. I smiled, thinking that perhaps Jason and his wife, Courtney, were coming early to help me with the final details or to drop Sophie off before the rest of the family arrived. I dried my hands and walked toward the driveway, feeling that beautiful pride a mother feels when she can spoil her own. But when Jason stepped out of the vehicle, I didn't see joy on his face. He was alone. He wore a furrowed brow and walked fast, staring at his cell phone as if he were solving a global crisis, without even lifting his eyes to admire how I had transformed the backyard of his childhood into an open-air gala. "Hi, son," I said, extending my arms to greet him. "You arrived just in time to taste the sauce before." Jason stopped dead in his tracks, dodging my hug with a quick movement, as if he were in a hurry to shake off a burden. He looked at the set tables, the 80 chairs aligned perfectly, the string lights that would crisscross the yard at dusk, and let out a sigh of annoyance. "Mom, we have to talk fast because I'm running out of time," he said without taking off his designer sunglasses. I felt a sudden coldness in my stomach, the kind that warns you bad news is coming, even though the afternoon sun was still warming the pavement. "What is it, son? Did something happen to Sophie?" I asked, bringing my hand to my chest. No, Sophie is fine. She's at the salon with Courtney," he replied, waving his hand as if dismissing the concern. "The issue is the party. Look, Mom, we thought it over and decided to hold the celebration somewhere else." I stood motionless. The sound of the birds in the trees seemed to stop for a second. "What do you mean, somewhere else?" I murmured, pointing to the tables. "Jason, the guests arrive in 40 minutes. The food is ready, the brisket, the mac and cheese, the cornbread muffins your daughter loves so much. Everything is here." Jason took off his glasses and looked at me with that expression of condescension he had adopted since he was named regional manager at his firm. That look that says, "Poor old woman, she doesn't understand how the modern world works." "Oh, Mom, please." Courtney managed to get a last-minute reservation at the Skyline Lounge in the new downtown district. It's a minimalist place with AC, sushi appetizers, deconstructed sliders, that sort of thing. It's what's in style now. Sophie graduated in architecture. She needs to network at a high level, not have a hick party in her grandma's backyard. The word hick slipped from his mouth as if it were an insult, as if my house, which I built brick by brick with the sweat of my brow over hot stoves, was a shame. "But, son," I tried to keep my voice steady, though I felt my legs trembling. "I already invited your aunts, the godparents, the neighbors who watched Sophie grow up. They are coming here. We already sent a group text to everyone with the new location," he interrupted, checking his watch again. "Most confirmed they're going there. It's better, Mom. They have valet parking, and it doesn't smell like country cooking." I looked toward the open kitchen. The steam from the sides was still rising, carrying with it the heritage of my mother and grandmother. Country cooking. That's what he called the thing that paid for his university, bought his first car, and gave him the privileged life he now enjoyed. "And what do I do with all this?" I asked, pointing to the food for 80 people. "What do I do with the 80 empty chairs, Jason?" He shrugged, already turning around to leave. "I don't know, Mom. Freeze it or throw it away. It doesn't really matter. The important thing is that Sophie has a high-class party. Courtney says this rustic atmosphere doesn't fit the image we want to project." He stopped for a moment at the gate and threw the final phrase at me, the one that stuck like a splinter in my heart. "We don't need you for logistics anymore, Mom. Rest. You're too old for this hustle. If you want to come to the lounge, we'll wait for you there, but change your clothes, you smell like onions and grease." And just like that, he got into his SUV and sped off, leaving me alone in the middle of my decorated garden. I stood there, watching the dust cloud he raised as he left. Silence fell over the house again, but now it was a heavy, painful silence. 80 empty chairs looked at me as mute witnesses to my humiliation. "We don't need you anymore. You smell like onions." I walked slowly toward one of the tables and sat down. I ran my hand over the white tablecloth, impeccable, starched, just as my mother taught me. My hands, full of wrinkles and small oil burns from so many years of work, trembled slightly. Not from sadness, no. At first, I thought I was going to cry, that I would crumble right there on the fine china plate. But what I felt wasn't an urge to cry. It was a fire different from my stoves. It was a mixture of indignation and sudden clarity. For years, I had allowed Jason and Courtney to treat me like an outdated accessory, useful only when they needed me to babysit the girl or lend them money for some surefire business deal. I had made myself small so they could feel big. I had accepted their rudeness, thinking that's just how young people are these days. But this was different. This was a lack of respect for my work, my history, and my dignity. To despise food is a sin, but to despise the hands that prepared it with love is a betrayal. I stood up and walked toward the pots. I lifted the lid of the largest smoker. The brisket gleamed, dark with bark, juicy, perfect. It smelled of hickory, spices, molasses, and brown sugar. It was a feast fit for kings. Throw it away? Freeze it to eat leftovers for months alone in my kitchen? "Don't even dream of it, Jason," I said out loud, and my voice sounded firm in the empty garden. They believed that because I was old, my world ended within the four walls of this house. They believed my only function was to wait for their scraps of attention. They didn't know that Martha, from the Golden Spoon, still had contacts, still had a name, and above all, still had a heart that knew where the true value of things lay. I went into the house and looked for my phone book, that old worn leather agenda where I wrote down the orders of my old clients. I looked for the letter C. There it was, Community Kitchen Street, Jude. And right below it, the personal number of Pastor Dave, the director of the shelter for the homeless and migrants, which was on the other side of the train tracks in the zone my son would never step foot in for fear of dirtying his shoes. I dialed the number. The phone rang 3 times before someone answered. "Hello?" responded a tired, raspy voice. "Dave, it's Martha." "Martha," from the catering service. There was a brief pause, and then the voice animated. "Miss Martha, what a miracle to hear from you. How can I serve you? Do you need help with something at the house?" "No, Dave. On the contrary, I'm calling you because I have a problem, but I think it's a blessing in disguise for your people." "Tell me, Miss Martha." "I have food ready for 80 people. And it's not just any food, Dave. It's hickory-smoked brisket, mac and cheese, collard greens with ham hocks, homemade cornbread, and peach cobbler. I have tables set, linen tablecloths, music, and flowers." I heard Dave hold his breath on the other end of the line. I knew the shelter always struggled to get donations, that often they had to stretch a watery soup to feed 50 mouths. "Miss Martha, are you serious? And for when would this be?" "Right now, Dave. Right now. The party is set up in my backyard. Bring the shelter van. Bring the families, the veterans who are alone, the folks who just arrived and haven't had a hot meal in weeks. Bring them all. 80 can sit, but if more arrive, we'll bring chairs out of the kitchen. But, Miss Martha, what about your party? Didn't you have a commitment today?" I looked at the empty chairs and then toward the gate where my son had left with his arrogance. My commitment was canceled because country food wasn't good enough for them, I said, feeling how each word returned a little of the strength Jason had tried to take from me. But I'm not going to let this go to waste. I want you to come. I want you to eat like kings, and I want you to come dressed in the best you have, because I'm going to receive you as if you were the president himself. Miss Martha, I don't know what to say. God bless you. We'll be there in half an hour. We'll have to make 2 trips, but we're coming. I'll be waiting. Don't take too long. The cornbread is best when it's warm. I hung up the phone. My hands were no longer trembling. A strange calm took over me. It wasn't the calm of resignation, but that of a general changing strategy in the middle of a battle. I went to my bedroom, took off my apron, and looked in the mirror. I saw the wrinkles, yes, but I also saw the eyes of a woman who had built a business from nothing, who had fed thousands, who had raised a son alone when I was widowed at 30. Jason had told me to change because I smelled like onions. I opened my closet and took out my best dress, not the one I planned to use to serve them humbly, but a royal blue silk dress I saved for a special occasion. I put on my pearl earrings, painted my lips a discreet red, and let my hair down, brushing it with pride. I sprayed on my favorite perfume, one that smelled of gardenias, not the kitchen. I went out to the garden again. The sun was beginning to set, dyeing the sky orange and violet. I turned on the string lights. The place looked magical. 20 minutes later, I heard the noise of an old, wheezing engine. It wasn't my son's luxury SUV. It was the faded van from the shelter. Behind it came a small caravan of people walking. I saw women with babies in their arms, men in worn but clean clothes, elderly folks leaning on canes. I opened the gate wide. "Welcome," I shouted with a smile that came from the bottom of my soul. "Come in, please. Make yourselves at home." Seeing their faces was something I will never forget. They entered shyly, looking at the lights, the flowers, the tables set with such elegance, as if they were afraid of breaking something just by looking at it. An older gentleman took off his hat and pressed it against his chest, his eyes filling with tears when he saw the steaming trays of food. "Sit wherever you like," I directed them, guiding them to the chairs. "Today, you are all guests of honor." Pastor Dave got out of the van and gave me a hug that almost broke my ribs. "You don't know what this means for them, Miss Martha. Today is Lily's birthday, that little girl over there." He pointed to a small girl of about 7 with a patched dress, and her mom was crying because she didn't even have enough for a candy bar. "Well, today Lily gets peach cobbler," I said, feeling a lump in my throat. "The good kind, with vanilla ice cream." The music started to play. I put on a playlist of classic soul and Motown. I started to serve. I didn't let anyone help me serve. I wanted to do it. I wanted to see their eyes when I put the plate overflowing with brisket and sides in front of them. I wanted to hear them. "Thank you, ma'am. God bless you, mother. I've never eaten anything this good." The garden filled with laughter, the sound of silverware, life. There were no poses. There were no people checking their phones to see if the place was Instagrammable. There was hunger, yes, but there was also a genuine gratitude that filled the space my son had left empty with his contempt. While I was serving more warm rolls, my cell phone vibrated in my pocket. It was a text from Jason, surely a photo of the Skyline Lounge with its microscopic appetizers. I didn't check it. I didn't care. But what I didn't know, and what Jason didn't imagine either, was that among the guests Dave brought, there was someone who didn't fit the usual profile of the shelter. A quiet man, with a gray beard, eating with impeccable manners, observing every detail of my garden and my food with almost clinical attention. I approached his table to offer him more sweet tea. "Is everything okay, sir?" I asked him. He looked at me with gray, piercing, intelligent eyes. He wiped his mouth with the cloth napkin and nodded slowly. "Mrs. Martha, did you prepare this brisket?" he asked with a deep voice. "That's right. It's my great-grandmother's secret rub, cooked low and slow for 14 hours. It is extraordinary," he said, without looking away. "I have spent years looking for this flavor. Years. My name is Lawrence. I got stranded here when my car broke down near the shelter, and Pastor Dave offered to bring me. But I think fate has curious ways of operating." I didn't give it much importance at that moment. I was too busy being happy watching the children run through my garden. Night fell, and the party was in full swing. I sat in a corner with a glass of wine in hand, watching my masterpiece. I had turned a disaster into a miracle. My son had told me, "We don't need you anymore." But these 80 people told me with every bite that I was indispensable. Suddenly, I saw the lights of a familiar car approaching the gate. It was Jason's SUV. He was coming back. Surely he had forgotten something or came to scold me for not going to his modern party. I stood up slowly, smoothed my blue silk dress, and walked toward the entrance. Behind me, people laughed and ate. In front of me, my son stepped out of the car, and his face upon seeing my garden full of strangers, seeing the overflowing joy in the place he had despised, was priceless. But he had no idea that the real surprise wasn't the people in the garden, but who was sitting at the main table savoring my cooking as if it were liquid gold. Jason was about to learn that you never underestimate a mother and a master of life. Jason stood petrified in the driveway with his hand still on the open door of his truck. His eyes went from one side to the other, scanning my garden as if he were witnessing a crime and not a dinner. He looked at Lily eating pie, at Pastor Dave pouring lemonade, and at the shelter veterans laughing under the lights he despised. His face went from surprise to a red, tight fury that bulged the veins in his neck. "Mom!" he shouted, completely ignoring that there were 80 people present. "What the hell is this? Have you gone crazy? You've turned the house into a soup kitchen." He marched toward me, not caring about trampling the freshly cut lawn with his Italian shoes. The guests fell silent little by little. The Motown music kept playing softly, making a strange contrast with the violence emanating from my son. I didn't back up an inch. I smoothed the skirt of my blue silk dress and lifted my chin. "Good evening, Jason," I said with a calm that surprised even myself. "I thought you'd be enjoying the air conditioning and the sushi sliders. Did you forget something?" Jason stopped a yard away from me, lowering his voice so those people wouldn't hear, although his hissing tone was even more poisonous. "Don't get cute. I came for the envelope Sophie's graduation gift. Courtney told me you surely had it prepared, and with the rush of changing locations, we forgot to ask you for it." He looked with disgust toward the table where Lawrence was and added, "And do me a favor and kick these people out before we catch something. What will people think if they find out Sophie's grandmother runs a homeless shelter in her backyard?" There it was. The real reason for his return wasn't regret, it wasn't concern for his mother. It was money. The money I had saved dollar by dollar from my sales to give to my granddaughter. While Jason kept grumbling and checking his watch, my eyes drifted for a second toward the main table. The man with the gray beard, Lawrence, hadn't been intimidated. On the contrary, he had placed his silverware on the plate with extreme delicacy and was watching us. That was when I saw it. I really saw it. Lawrence had taken a cloth handkerchief from his pocket to wipe the corners of his lips. On his pinky finger shone a very antique silver ring with an engraved crest, a compass, and a square interlaced over a mountain. My heart skipped a beat. I knew that ring. I had seen it 30 years ago when I catered the banquet for the inauguration of the municipal hall. That man wasn't just any drifter Dave had picked up on the road. My mind, trained to remember faces, tastes, and allergies of thousands of clients, traveled to the past at the speed of light. I remembered the social magazines from decades ago, the newspapers that spoke of the hermit architect, the genius who designed half the modern buildings in the city, and who, after his wife's death, disappeared from public life, renouncing the frivolity of high society. Lawrence Sterling, the founder of Sterling and Associates, the very firm where Sophie had dreamed of doing her internship and was rejected due to a lack of openings. The same firm now run by young executives who surely didn't even know the founder's face. I looked at his clothes. They were simple, worn by use, but of high quality. His boots were old, but genuine leather. Dave said his car had broken down. Of course, a man like that wouldn't drive a new car to show off. Jason, in his blindness of arrogance, was insulting a living legend. He was calling a bum the man who wrote the textbooks his daughter studied in college. "Are you listening to me, Mom?" Jason snapped his fingers in front of my face, pulling me out of my thoughts. "The envelope. Give it to me, and I'm leaving. I don't have time to watch you play Mother Teresa." A slow smile, almost imperceptible, drew across my lips. For years, Jason had made me feel like I understood nothing, that my world of pots and spices was small and insignificant compared to his world of glass offices and financial projections. He had made me believe my experience didn't count, that my intuition as a mother and businesswoman was rusty. How wrong he was. My small world had taught me to read people by how they eat, how they look, how they say thank you. My son saw expensive suits and saw success. I saw a clean plate and saw honesty. He saw poverty in my garden. I saw, sitting at table 3, my granddaughter's future. The envelope is in my bedroom, Jason, I told him gently. But I'm not going to get it right now. I am attending to my guests. Jason opened his mouth, incredulous. His eyes injected with rage. Are you telling me I have to wait for these starving people to finish eating so you can give me my daughter's money? I am telling you that if you want the gift, you will have to wait. Or better yet, I paused, calculating my move like someone adding the exact pinch of salt. Why don't you sit for a moment? There is plenty of food. Maybe it would do you good to taste the brisket before going to your plastic party. I wouldn't taste that grease if I were dead, he spat. I'll wait here, but hurry up. Courtney is texting me every 2 minutes. I turned around, giving him my back. I felt his gaze fixed on my neck, but it no longer burned me. Now, I was the one in control. I walked slowly toward Lawrence's table with the excuse of clearing some empty plates. Upon approaching, Lawrence looked at me. In his gray eyes there was a spark of amusement and, above all, recognition. He knew that I knew, and more importantly, he had heard every despicable word that had come out of my son's mouth. Mrs. Martha, Lawrence said with a gravelly voice, ignoring the scene Jason was making in the driveway. This brisket has reminded me of Sundays at my mother's house half a century ago. It had been a long time since I tasted something authentic. Nowadays everything is a facade, lots of decoration, little flavor. He was talking about the food, but we both knew he was talking about much more. Authenticity is an expensive ingredient, Mr. Lawrence, I replied in a low voice, using his title for the first time. He arched an eyebrow, surprised I recognized him, but then smiled with complicity. He said nothing, only nodded slightly and took his glass of sweet tea as if it were the best champagne in the world. I returned to the kitchen with my heart beating 1,000 miles an hour. My brain was working frantically. I had my granddaughter's idol in my garden, and my son, the fool who had just despised him. I could tell Jason who that man was. I could scream at him, imbecile, that bum could buy your company with the spare change in his pocket. But no, that would be too easy. That wouldn't teach Jason anything. He would only change his attitude out of self-interest. He would become servile and fake, as he always did with people of money. No, the lesson had to be deeper. It had to be cooked on low heat. I entered my room and looked for the envelope. Inside was $10,000 cash, my savings from 2 years. I looked at the money and then looked out the window toward the garden. Jason was leaning against his SUV, typing furiously on his cell phone, not deigning to look at anyone. I made a decision. I took the cash out of the envelope and hid it in my underwear drawer. The envelope remained empty. I looked for a sheet of paper and a pen. I wrote a quick note, folded it, and put it in the envelope. I went out again. The night was cool, but I felt a comforting warmth in my chest. I walked toward Jason, who upon seeing me put away the phone and extended his hand with impatience. Finally, give me that. Here you go, I told him, extending the envelope but not letting go when he grabbed it. But I want to ask you a favor, son. What? He pulled on the envelope, but I held it with strength. I want you to go inside and say hello for just 5 minutes. Congratulate Sophie on my behalf over the phone in front of me, and take a plate of food for her. I know she likes my brisket, even if to you it smells like country. Jason huffed, looking at the sky as if asking for patience. Mom, for God's sake. Fine, if that gets me out of here faster. But I'm not shaking anyone's hand. No need, I said, releasing the envelope. Just go in. Jason put the envelope in the inside pocket of his blazer without checking it. Fatal error. Never accept a package without seeing the contents. I taught him that as a child. He walked behind me toward the table area. His presence was like a black cloud on a sunny day. But I needed him to be close. I needed Lawrence to see him up close. Good evening, Jason mumbled to the air without looking anyone in the eye. Nobody answered him, except Pastor Dave, who has always been a saint and raised his hand in a sign of peace. Jason stood next to the dessert table, arms crossed, radiating discomfort. Done, I said hello. Now give me the container with food for Sophie, and I'm leaving." At that moment, Lawrence stood up. He was a tall man, and although his clothes were old, he stood with a dignity that made Jason step back by pure instinct. Lawrence walked toward us. Jason looked at him with disdain, wrinkling his nose. "Mrs. Martha," Lawrence said, olympically ignoring my son, "I would like to ask you a favor. Tell me, Mr. Lawrence, I understand your granddaughter is an architect." "I heard the gentleman," he said the word with delicious irony, "mentioned she graduated today." Jason let out a mocking little laugh. "Yeah, Grandpa, she's an architect, but I don't think she needs advice on how to build cardboard houses." The garden went absolutely silent. Pastor Dave brought his hands to his mouth. I felt my blood boiling, but I saw Lawrence's gaze. He wasn't offended, he was evaluating. He was measuring my son like an engineer measures a structure about to collapse. "You are right," Lawrence said with a soft and dangerous voice. "Fragile structures don't need advice. They need foundations. And it seems many are missing here." Jason frowned, not fully understanding the insult but feeling he had lost something in that exchange. "Let's go, Mom. Give me the food. This guy is delirious." I handed him the container with brisket that I already had prepared. Jason took it with 2 fingers as if it were radioactive material. "Bye, Mom. Thanks for the detail." He touched the pocket where the envelope was. "And please, next time consult with us before doing your charity works. It gives a bad image." He turned around and walked toward the exit. Lawrence and I stood next to each other, watching him walk away. "Your son is in a big hurry to get nowhere," Lawrence murmured. "That's right," I sighed. "He thinks the world can be bought." Lawrence put his hand in his pocket and took out a business card. It was white, thick, minimalist. It only had a name and a phone number in relief. "Mrs. Martha, my phone died hours ago and my car is still dead on the highway. Could you lend me your cell phone to make a call? I have to ask for a pickup. And I think I'm going to need to speak with my secretary to schedule a meeting first thing Monday morning." "A meeting for what?" I asked, although I already suspected the answer. Lawrence looked at me and smiled. A smile of an old wolf who still knows how to hunt. "To review who the suppliers of my company are. I have a feeling we are working with people who do not value quality. And that, Mrs. Martha, is going to end very soon." I handed him my phone. While he dialed, I looked toward the gate where Jason had disappeared. He was leaving with an envelope that had no money, but a written lesson, and I was staying here with 80 bums and the most powerful man in the city, about to cook the sweetest revenge of my life. Jason thought the party was over. Poor fool. The real party was just getting started. Lawrence returned the phone with a slight bow, almost imperceptible to the others, but loaded with a meaning only he and I understood. While my guests from the shelter continued enjoying the cornbread and sweet tea, the atmosphere around table 3 had changed. It was no longer just a grateful old man for a plate of food. It was a general who had just given the order to attack. "Thank you, Mrs. Martha," he said. And his voice now had a metallic timbre of accustomed authority. "My ride will arrive in 15 minutes. "Your ride?" I asked, feigning ignorance while collecting some dirty plates. "Wouldn't you prefer Dave to drop you off in the van? It's late and that area can be dangerous." Lawrence let out a brief, dry laugh. "Believe me, ma'am, the danger is me when my time is wasted. And your son, regrettably, has made me lose my patience, which is a resource much more valuable than time." He winked at me and sat back down, crossing his legs with an elegance his worn trousers couldn't hide. I retired to the kitchen, feeling a tingle on the back of my neck. The machinery had been set in motion. As soon as I entered the house, my cell phone vibrated with the fury of a trapped animal. It was Jason. I let it ring once, twice, 3 times. I imagined the scene. Him at the Skyline Lounge, surrounded by good people, opening the envelope discreetly under the table, hoping to see the bills to pay the exorbitant bill of his modern party, and finding my note. I answered on the 4th call, putting it on speaker while I started washing a casserole dish. "Hello? What the hell does this mean, Mom?" Jason's scream almost blew out the phone speaker. Electronic music could be heard in the background along with the nervous clinking of glasses. "The envelope is empty. There's just a stupid piece of paper." "It's not a stupid paper, son," I responded, with a calm that contrasted with his hysteria. "It's advice. And a mother's advice is worth more than gold, even if you have forgotten how to listen to it." "Stop with the cheap philosophy," he bellowed. I could hear the desperation in his voice. Surely he had already ordered the champagne bottles. I need the money, Mom. The bill here is going to be... Courtney is going to kill me. I told her you were covering Sophie's gift. You made me look like an idiot. I passed the sponge slowly along the edge of the clay pot, removing the remains of sauce. You made yourself look like an idiot, Jason, when you despised the effort of my work and the food of your home. The money is safe in my bank account. It's going to stay there for when Sophie needs it for real, for something serious, not to impress people she doesn't even know. You are resentful, vindictive. Tomorrow I am going to come over and... Tomorrow is Monday, Jason, I interrupted him, drying my hands on my apron. Tomorrow, working people get up early. I suggest you enjoy your high-class party. And by the way, be careful what you eat. Wouldn't want that sushi to disagree with you. I hung up. I didn't give him a chance to reply. The silence that followed in the kitchen was delicious, sweeter than quince paste. For the first time in years, I didn't feel guilty. I didn't feel that self-imposed obligation to solve the life of my 40-year-old son. I felt power. I went out to the garden just in time to see the conclusion of the first part of the night. In front of my gate, where Jason's SUV had been, stopped an automobile that looked like a black, shiny spaceship. It was a luxury sedan, one of those only seen in movies or outside embassies. The engine was so silent, only the crunch of tires on gravel was heard. The music stopped. The guests from the shelter stood with mouths open, taco halfway to their mouths. Pastor Dave adjusted his glasses, incredulous. From the driver's seat stepped a young man impeccably dressed in a suit and white gloves. He jogged around the car and opened the back door. He stood firm like a soldier. Lawrence Sterling stood up from his plastic chair, brushed the breadcrumbs off his old sweater. He walked toward me before leaving. The brisket was exquisite, Mrs. Martha, he said, taking my hand and kissing it with an ancient gallantry. I haven't eaten with such peace in decades. Tomorrow I will send someone to pick up the plates. I don't want you washing anything else today. Don't worry, Mr. Lawrence. Here, we are used to work. I know. But hard work deserves reward, and arrogance deserves correction. Rest. He walked toward the luxury car. The chauffeur bowed his head respectfully. Good evening, Mr. Sterling, the chauffeur said, loud enough for everyone to hear. Lawrence got into the car, and the door closed with a solid, hermetic thud. The vehicle glided away down the dark street of my neighborhood, leaving behind 80 people who couldn't believe what they had just seen. Good Lord, whispered Dave, approaching me. Miss Martha, that was... Yes, Dave, that was a guest who was hungry, like all of us. The party continued for a couple more hours, but the air had changed. There was a new electricity, a sensation that in that house, in that country backyard, important things had happened. When the last guest left, taking their leftovers wrapped in aluminum foil, I closed the gate and sat in one of the empty chairs. I looked at the stars. I thought of my son, surely fighting with the waiter over the bill. I thought of my granddaughter Sophie, trapped in the middle of that farce. And I thought of Lawrence Sterling sharpening his knives in his mansion. I went to sleep with a smile. Monday morning dawned cloudy with that leaden gray that predicts a storm. But I got up with an energy I hadn't felt since I opened my business 30 years ago. I made myself a strong coffee and started cleaning the house, not because I had to, but because I needed to move my hands while my mind plotted. At 10 a.m., the doorbell rang. It wasn't Jason. It was a courier with a helmet and fluorescent vest. Mrs. Martha Valdez? Delivery. Requires signature. I signed on his electronic pad and he handed me a thick, cream-colored envelope, heavy and textured. In the upper left corner, in gold relief, it read, Sterling & Associates, Architecture and Urban Planning. My hands trembled a little opening it. I won't deny it. Inside was a formal card and a brief letter. Dear Mrs. Martha, authenticity is a scarce commodity in the current market. Your capacity to organize, manage resources, and maintain quality under pressure is something my company values. I would like to invite you to my offices today at 2 p.m. It is not a job interview. It is a strategic consultation. Please accept the transport I will send for you. Sincerely, Lawrence Sterling. I left the letter on the kitchen table. A strategic consultation? Me, the woman who smells like onions. I checked the clock. I had 4 hours. I went to my closet. Ignoring the floral dresses I used for the market, I looked in the back in a plastic cover I hadn't opened in years. I took out my navy blue pantsuit, the one I wore when I received the Entrepreneur of the Year award from the county 15 years ago. It fit a little loose now. The years had consumed my flesh a bit, but with a couple of quick adjustments with needle and thread, it was presentable. I pulled my hair into a high, firm bun. I put on my low-heeled shoes, polished until they looked like mirrors. I looked in the mirror. I no longer saw the sad grandmother of yesterday. I saw Martha, the businesswoman. At 1:30 sharp, the same black car from the night before parked in front of my house. The neighbors peeked out the windows, whispering. Let them talk, I thought. Let them talk all they want. The ride toward the financial district was silent and smooth. I sat on the leather seat, watching the city pass through tinted windows. We passed near the Skyline Lounge, which in the daylight looked like what it was, a gray concrete box without a soul. The car stopped in front of the Sterling Tower, a glass skyscraper that reflected the clouds. It was the tallest and most imposing building in the area. The chauffeur opened the door, and I stepped out, feeling the lobby's air conditioning hit my face as soon as I crossed the revolving doors. Everything inside smelled of money and cleanliness. Marble floors, soaring ceilings, people walking fast with expensive suits and wireless earbuds. I approached the reception. Good afternoon. I have an appointment with Mr. Sterling, I said, keeping my voice steady, though my legs wobbled a bit. The receptionist, a young girl with too much makeup, looked me up and down. Her gaze stopped on my working hands and my out-of-fashion suit. Do you have a confirmed appointment? The architect doesn't see anyone without. The phone on her desk rang. She answered. Her face paled and she hung up quickly. Excuse me, Mrs. Valdez. I didn't know it was you. The architect is expecting you on the 40th floor. The private elevator is to your right. I walked toward the elevator with my head held high. As the doors closed, I saw my reflection in the polished metal. A lone woman, entering the lion's den. But the lion had invited me to dinner. The elevator rose so fast my ears popped. When the doors opened on the 40th floor, I found a wide lobby decorated with models of impressive buildings. There was a waiting area with black leather armchairs, and there, sitting on the edge of one, shaking his leg nervously, was Jason. My son looked terrible. He had deep circles under his eyes, his tie was loose, and he was sweating despite the cold air conditioning. He held a folder full of documents in his hands and checked his watch every 5 seconds. When he saw me exit the private elevator, he petrified. He stood up slowly, as if seeing a ghost. Mom? He asked with a broken voice. What? What are you doing here? I stopped in front of him. I didn't hug him. I didn't smile with maternal sweetness. I looked at him like one looks at a supplier who has failed a delivery. I have a meeting, Jason. And you? Jason blinked, confused. He looked toward the hallway of executive offices and then at me. A meeting here? Mom, please, don't tell me you came to ask for a cleaning job or something. This isn't the place for you. I'm in the middle of a terrible crisis. Oh, really? I asked, adjusting my purse on my arm. What happened, Jason? He ran his hand through his hair, desperate. He needed to vent, and as always, used his mother as an emotional trash can without thinking I could understand. I don't know what's happening. This morning we got a call from the General Directorate of Sterling and Associates. They said they're going to audit all supply contracts in the region, specifically the ones I manage. They say there are quality inconsistencies. It's absurd. I've been managing this account for 5 years. If I lose this client, my firm fires me. Mom, they fire me. My, I said without showing surprise. Quality is important, son. I told you yesterday. Sometimes one thinks they can pass off a cat for a hare or supermarket sushi for a banquet and thinks no one notices, but someone always notices. Jason frowned, as if starting to connect 2 cables in his brain, but the idea was too absurd to accept. What are you talking about? What does sushi have to do with this? Mom, go home. Seriously, if my boss sees me chatting with you while I wait to get called to, well, probably to be fired. It's going to be worse. Go. I'll give you money for a taxi later. At that moment, a double solid wood door opened at the end of the hall. An executive assistant came out, a woman of about 50 with glasses and a severe look. Mr. Jason Romero? She called. Jason jumped. Yes, that's me. And Mrs. Martha Valdez, continued the assistant. I raised my hand elegantly. Present. Jason looked at me with eyes popping out. What? Why are they calling you too? Mom, what did you do? Did you come to complain about something? You're going to ruin me. The assistant gestured for us to enter. The architect will receive you both now. Both? Jason was on the verge of panic. It must be a mistake, miss. She is my mother. She is an elderly person. Sometimes she gets confused and— There is no mistake, Mr. Romero, said the assistant coldly. Come in. Jason entered first, almost tripping. I entered behind him with a firm step. Lawrence Sterling's office was immense. It had floor-to-ceiling windows, showing the whole city at his feet. In the center, a dark wood desk, clean, without papers, only a computer and a small centerpiece of fresh hydrangeas, the same ones I had in my garden. Lawrence was standing, looking out the window, his back to us. He wore an impeccable gray tailored suit that made him look taller and more powerful than the night before. But when he turned, I saw in his eyes the same mischievous glint he had when he tasted my brisket. Good afternoon, Lawrence said. His voice filled the room. Jason rushed to make a clumsy, almost servile bow. Architect Sterling, it is an honor, a true honor. I didn't know you personally would be conducting this review. I want to tell you that any misunderstanding about construction materials we can clarify immediately. My firm has always— Lawrence raised a hand and Jason fell silent instantly. Sit down, Romero, Lawrence ordered, pointing to a simple chair in front of the desk. Then he looked at me and his expression softened. Mrs. Martha, please, take the armchair. Jason froze upon hearing my name in the mouth of the great architect. He sat slowly, looking at me sideways as if I were an alien. I settled into the leather armchair, crossed my legs, and waited. I have cited you both because we have a foundation problem, Lawrence began, walking slowly around his desk. And as you know, if the foundations are rotten, the structure collapses. We use top-quality concrete, Jason started to stammer. I'm not talking about concrete, Romero, Lawrence cut him off harshly. I'm talking about values. I'm talking about integrity. I'm talking about knowing how to distinguish between what has a price and what has value. Jason was sweating buckets. He didn't understand anything. He looked at Lawrence and then at me, seeking an explanation. Mr. Sterling, with all due respect, I don't understand what my mother is doing here. She is a housewife. She cooked for parties. She has nothing to do with construction contracts. Lawrence smiled. It was a predatory smile. Ah, no? Curious. Because yesterday, while enjoying the best meal I've tasted in years in this lady's garden, I had the impression that she understands more about construction and structure than you and your entire team of engineers combined. Jason's face turned white as paper. He opened his mouth, but no sound came out. His eyes traveled to my face, looking for a sign that this was a joke. In the garden, Jason whispered. But yesterday in the garden there were only hobos. The word remained floating in the air, heavy and toxic. Lawrence leaned on the edge of his desk, getting closer to Jason. Careful with labels, Romero. Sometimes what you call a hobo is simply someone who has decided to travel light to see the landscape better. And sometimes what you call success is nothing more than an expensive suit full of hot air. I remained silent. I didn't need to speak. My presence there, sitting as an equal in front of the man who could destroy my son's career with a call, was the loudest shout I had given in my life. Jason started to tremble. Finally, his brain connected the dots. The man with the gray beard, the starving man he insulted, the man who told him he lacked foundations. You were there, stuttered Jason. You are the guy from table 3. Lawrence Sterling, at your service, he said, extending his hand with irony, the same hand Jason had refused to shake the night before. And it seems, Mr. Romero, that we have much to talk about regarding your future. But first, I have a business proposal to discuss with your mother. Lawrence turned toward me, ignoring completely the man falling apart in the chair next to him. Mrs. Martha, my firm is going to initiate a massive urban restoration project in the old district of the city. We want to revitalize the neighborhood, not gentrify it. I need someone who understands the soul of the community, who knows how to feed the spirit of the people, not just fill out forms. I want you to be the lead consultant for the social integration and community gastronomy program. Jason let out a gasp. Consultant? He asked with a threat of a voice. Her? Yes, her, answered Lawrence without looking at him. Because she knows that 80 empty chairs aren't a failure, they are an opportunity. And you, Romero, you saw 80 chairs and only saw trash. That blindness is going to cost you very dearly. I looked at my son. For the first time, I didn't see the arrogant executive. I saw a scared child who had just realized he had broken the most expensive toy in the store and had no way to pay for it. I leaned forward, resting my elbows on my knees, and looked at Lawrence. "I agree to hear the proposal, architect," I said calmly, "but with one condition." "Whatever you say, Mrs. Martha. That my son stays and listens. I want him to learn how a real deal is closed. No shortcuts, no lies, and no sushi sliders." Lawrence let out a laugh that resonated throughout the office. "Seems fair. Romero, take notes. Today you are going to receive the first class of your life that is actually worth something." Jason took out a pen with trembling hands. He lowered his head. The lesson was just beginning, and I knew the fire was just starting to heat up. Revenge is served cold, they say. But justice? Justice is cooked slow and low, and it smells like hickory smoke. The silence in the 40th floor office was so dense you could cut it with a knife. Jason looked tiny in that designer chair. Lawrence moved to a side shelf and took out a thick gray folder. He dropped it on the desk with a thud. "Let's talk about quality, Romero," Lawrence said, opening the folder. "Because at the end of the day, whether it's brisket or a 30-story building, what matters is what's underneath the surface." Lawrence slid a series of photographs toward us. I leaned in to see them. They were images of construction sites, cracks in walls, rusted rebar, and bags of cement from brands I wouldn't use to patch a sidewalk. "Do you recognize these sites?" asked the architect softly. They are from the Greenview project," stammered Jason, wiping sweat from his forehead. "But architect, those were supply issues. The vendors swore to us that—" "You signed the authorizations," Lawrence interrupted, locking eyes with him. "You approved the purchase of second-rate materials to invoice them as premium. The price difference is notable. Where did that money go, Romero? To pay for parties at the Skyline Lounge? To buy Italian suits to impress people who don't care?" I felt a pang in my stomach, not hunger, but shame. My son, whom I raised with values, was being exposed as a cheat, and the worst was the reason behind it: appearances. "I can explain." Jason tried to defend himself, but his voice was thin. "Mom, tell him something. Tell him I'm a hard-working man. You know how hard I try." He looked at me with pleading eyes. Those same eyes he used when he broke a plate as a child and wanted me to defend him from his father. But this time there were no broken plates. There were lives at risk and lost honor. "Hard work doesn't justify bad work, Jason," I said, my voice sounding more authoritative than I expected. "When I catered, if the meat wasn't fresh, it wasn't served, even if I lost money. Because my name was on every plate. You put your name on those cracked walls. Don't ask me to defend the indefensible." Jason stared, open-mouthed. He expected the self-sacrificing mother. He found the businesswoman who doesn't tolerate mediocrity. "Exactly," Lawrence said, closing the folder. "The full audit will take a week. Depending on the results, you won't just lose your job. You could face legal charges for criminal negligence." Jason literally collapsed. He hunched in the chair, hiding his face in his hands. "You can't do this to me. I have a mortgage. Sophie's loans. Courtney is going to leave me if I lose my status." It was pathetic to see him like that. Stripped of his pride, only a scared, emotionally indebted man remained. At that precise instant, as if fate had a macabre sense of humor, Jason's cell phone began to ring. The screen flashed. "Courtney, my love." Jason looked at the phone with terror. "Answer it, Romero," ordered Lawrence. "It's not polite to keep a lady waiting." "And put it on speaker." "No, please. Answer." Jason slid his finger with a trembling hand. "Jason, finally!" Courtney's voice shrieked, shrill and furious. "Where are you?" "I'm waiting in the hotel lobby for the post-graduation brunch." And the card was declined. "Declined, Jason!" "How embarrassing with Sophie's boyfriend's parents. Can you explain why there are no funds? And by the way, your mom never gave us the envelope. That stingy old woman probably spent it on her meds or feeding her cats. I need you to fix this." I closed my eyes a moment. Stingy old woman. So that's what Courtney thought of me. After all the years watching Sophie, the meals sent over, the forgotten loans. Jason was pale, looking at the phone in horror, then at me, then at Lawrence. "Courtney, I'm in a meeting. I can't talk," he whispered loudly. "I don't give a damn about your meeting," she shouted. "I'm going through the embarrassment of my life because of your incompetence. Fix it or I'm going to my parents." Lawrence signaled Jason to cut the call. Jason hung up, and the silence returned, but now loaded with an unbearable truth. "There you have it," said Lawrence. "The loyalty you bought with credit cards and appearances. At the first bump, they abandon you. And yet, last night in your mother's garden, I saw people who had nothing sharing the little they had with a smile. I saw real loyalty." Jason had tears in his eyes. "Mom, forgive me," he sobbed. "You were right about everything. Forgiveness is easy to give, but learning is hard to acquire," I told him. "Forgiveness is earned with deeds, Jason, not tears. Now wipe your face and behave like an adult." Lawrence turned back to his desk. "Good. Let's move to the second point of the agenda. The reason Mrs. Martha is here." He slid a blue-bound document toward me. "This is a senior consultant contract, Mrs. Martha." I put on my reading glasses and read. My eyes widened at the figures. "Architect," I murmured. "There is a mistake. This monthly amount. It's too much." Jason craned his neck and saw the figure. He gasped. "That's more than I make as a regional manager," he exclaimed, forgetting for a second he was on the verge of firing. "It's impossible. She doesn't have a university degree. She only knows how to cook." Lawrence slammed his hand on the table. "She knows how to manage scarce resources and turn them into abundance. She has emotional intelligence, something you absolutely lack. She has the community's respect. And above all, Romero, she has integrity. That is paid dearly in my company because it is a rare resource." Jason shrank in his chair. "Mrs. Martha, do you accept the challenge?" I looked at the contract. Then I looked at my hands. All my life I had been told my place was in the kitchen. Now, a visionary man was giving me the place I always deserved. "I accept, Mr. Lawrence. But with an additional clause. Tell me." "I want the first restoration project to be Pastor Dave's shelter. It needs a new roof, industrial kitchen, and decent bathrooms. And I want the materials to be top quality. I will supervise them myself." "Done," said Lawrence. "Consider it approved. And one more thing," I added, turning slowly toward Jason. "I will need an assistant. Someone to carry papers, haul boxes, fetch coffee, and learn from the bottom up how things are done right. Someone who needs to purge his sins of arrogance." Lawrence arched an eyebrow, amused. Jason went tense. "Are you suggesting?" Lawrence started. "I am suggesting that instead of firing Jason and suing him, you put him to work under my direct supervision on the neighborhood project with the minimum wage of a junior assistant. If he lasts 6 months and proves he has learned respect and honesty, then you reconsider returning his position. If not, well, then he's on his own." Jason was open-mouthed. His mother, the old-fashioned woman, had just saved his skin, but at a cost that for his ego was worse than death. He was going to be my subordinate. "Mom, you can't be serious. I'm an executive. How am I going to be your assistant? Your friends at the Skyline Lounge aren't going to answer your calls when they know you have no money, son. And Courtney, well, you heard Courtney. You have 2 options: jail, unemployment, or work for your mother and learn to be a good man. You decide." Jason looked at Lawrence seeking an exit, but the architect was nodding enthusiastically. "It's a brilliant proposal. Accept or I call my lawyers right now." Jason lowered his head, defeated but alive. "I accept," he whispered. "Very well," I said, signing the contract. "Then let's get to work. Assistant Romero, straighten up. Tomorrow at 7 a.m., I want you at the shelter. No suit, work clothes, and boots. And don't be late, because respect is cooked with punctuality." Yes, ma'am." "Now leave. The architect and I have to discuss the budget." Jason left the room, dragging his feet. Before exiting, he stopped and looked at me. There was fear, yes, but perhaps for the first time, he was seeing me for real. Not as his mom, the little old lady, but as a force of nature. Lawrence laughed. "Mrs. Martha, you are formidable. You remind me of my grandmother." "Life teaches us to be tough, Mr. Lawrence. Either we learn or we get eaten alive. And I'm tired of being the main course at the table of ingrates." The smell of fresh cement and paint mixed with the unmistakable aroma of coffee boiling in the corner of the patio. 6 months have passed since that night, and today, as I look at the renovated facade of the New Hope Community Center, I feel like 10 years have passed. Jason walked past me carrying 2 buckets of waterproofing sealant, his shirt soaked in sweat and his boots covered in dust. He no longer walks as if the ground didn't deserve him. Now he steps strong. "Watch that step, Mr. Pete," Jason said to one of the older bricklayers, holding his arm. "We don't want accidents before the opening." I watched him from the shade. My son, Assistant Romero, had lost 10 pounds of weight and tons of arrogance. At first, it was hell. He arrived home with blisters and wounded pride, but physical labor cleanses the soul. Lawrence approached my side. "Your assistant has turned out to be more useful than predicted, Director Valdez." "The boy learns fast when he loses the fear of getting dirty," I replied. Today was the day. The 6-month probation was over. The shelter was no longer a sad place. It had a hotel-grade kitchen and a spacious dining room with solid wood tables. Jason helped sand himself. Director. Jason approached us, wiping his hands on a rag. The produce delivery arrived. Tomatoes are red and firm, nothing second-rate. I sent back the ones last week, but today they brought the best. "Well done. Have them go straight to the walk-in." Jason nodded and was about to leave when Lawrence raised a hand. "Wait a moment, Jason." My son stopped. He knew what day it was. He took off his cap and looked down. "The audit of your previous management closed a month ago," Lawrence said seriously. "The lawyers avoided the criminal lawsuit because you paid back every cent of the irregular commissions by selling your sports car and watches. That speaks well of you." Jason nodded. "Thank you, architect. It was the right thing." "Your probation ends today," continued Lawrence. "You have 2 options. First, regain your position at corporate, AC, secretary, junior executive salary. Courtney would surely be happy for you to be a man of status again." At hearing Courtney's name, Jason grimaced. She had left him 4 months ago for a divorce lawyer with a red convertible. It hurt Jason for a week. Then, I think he felt the relief of taking off tight shoes. "And the second option?" asked Jason. "Stay here in the social projects division. The salary is half what you'd make at corporate. The work is dirty and tired, but you are building things people actually need." I looked at my son. 6 months ago, he wouldn't have hesitated to run for the AC, but the man in front of me had calluses on his hands and a shine in his eyes. He looked at the renovated building. He saw Pastor Dave crying with joy hanging the welcome sign. He saw Sophie, who had come to help set tables and now looked at her father with an admiration she never had when he just gave her credit cards. "I'll stay," Jason said firmly. "In the glass tower, I'm replaceable. Here I feel my foundations are setting right. Plus, I still have a lot to learn from the boss." He winked at me. Lawrence smiled and shook his hand. "Welcome officially to the team, field manager. Now go wash up. We serve in 30 minutes and you smell like a tiger." The inauguration was a party, but not like that disastrous day. Here there were 200 occupied chairs. There was music, kids breaking piñatas, and food, lots of food. I organized a workshop with the women of the shelter. They prepped the sides. I just handled the brisket. Seeing Sophie sitting next to her father, eating BBQ and laughing while he told her how a bag of lime fell on him, filled my soul. Jason didn't have the car of the year, but he had his daughter's respect and the peace of his conscience. I sat on a bench. Lawrence sat next to me. "You did it, Martha. You didn't just raise a building. You raised a family. Buildings are easy, Mr. Lawrence. They have blueprints. Families don't. You know," Lawrence looked toward the horizon. "I've been offered projects in Dubai, New York, but this dining room smelling of hickory is the most important work I've signed in years. All thanks to you not throwing the food in the trash." "Food is never thrown away," I replied. "And people neither, even if sometimes it seems they are no longer useful." I realized my life had changed forever. At 68, when the world told me it was time to retire, I had found my true calling. Not just cooking, but nourishing. Nourishing empty stomachs, nourishing broken souls, and nourishing dignity. Jason approached us with Sophie on his arm. "Grandma," Sophie said, kissing my cheek. "Dad says tomorrow They start the public plaza project. He says he needs you to teach him how to negotiate with the ladies at the market. Oh, son, I laughed, standing up. Those are the toughest negotiators in the world. You're going to sweat more than carrying cement. But don't worry, I'll teach you. We walked toward the exit. Behind remained the noise of plates being cleared and the promise of a tomorrow full of work. I didn't have millions in the bank, nor did I need them. I had my hands, my seasoning, and the absolute certainty that never again would there be an empty chair at my table. My son wanted to retire me before my time. Poor thing. He didn't know that women like me are like good wine or good BBQ sauce. The more time passes, the stronger and deeper the flavor gets. Life doesn't end when you get gray hair. Life starts when you stop asking permission to be who you are.